I'd firstly like to apologise for such a long time in between uploads. And thank you to all the messages asking me when the next episode will be. Before we get started with this episode, here is a quick recap from last time around, where we built a shelter for the van to protect it from the elements. If you do enjoy this content, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to my channel and help me on the road to 1,000 subscribers. By the end of this episode, the inside of the van and the engine bay will be in epoxy primer. Most of the panels on this van will either need repair work or need replacing. The epoxy primer will help to keep the van protected while this work is being done. My game plan was to make this as manageable as possible, so I will tackle an area at a time. Before I properly started, I wanted to see what the condition of the cab floor was like under the sound deadening. As you can see on the far left and far right, next to where the seat bases would be, are too far gone. I just wanted to see what the bulk of the rest of the floor was like and to see if it was savable. After removing the sound deadening and giving it a clean, it wasn't too bad, but I'm going to leave it there for now and decide what the best plan of action is, whether to patch the rusted areas or replace the whole cab floor. The area I was going to work on first was this smaller floor section. The main floor I had already rubbed down and primed with a cheap primer to protect it until I properly painted it. As this is the first time I've done a project of this size, I now realise that was the wrong thing to do. What I should have done, which is what I'm doing now, is spray it with an epoxy primer to keep the metal sealed and prevent it from rusting. Before painting, I use some thinners to clean the surface. I am using Upol's Raptor Epoxy Primer. Please go easy on my painting skills. I'm not a professional and this is the first big job I've ever done, so there's going to be a lot of learning along the way. Raptor suggests 2 to 3 coats. I gave the floor 3 coats in total, just so it was nicely protected. Next up was the remaining floor. My mate Kev helped me with the airline hose to keep it away from the paintwork. I was having a bit of a nightmare with the spray gun not spraying correctly. I realised afterwards the gun just wasn't cleaned out well enough. It was still okay to get the job done on this occasion. I did flat back the area I'd previously sprayed, just so I could spray the entire floor at the same time. A bit pointless, but I'd mixed up enough paint so I thought I would use it. Next up, I wanted to cut out the rotten areas of the passenger and driver's side floor in the cab. Lots of spot welds to drill out before I could start cutting. With the spot welds removed, it was time to start cutting. I drew a line down the chassis rails to give me a guideline. I did this slowly and constantly checked I wasn't going to cut into anything I shouldn't. The area I wanted to start painting next was the cab. I started by removing the old sealant with a hot air gun and chisel. I'd thought quite a bit about the cab floor and what I should do. Where the seat bases were mounted were quite heavily pitted, and there were also some areas of heavy pitting throughout. Instead of welding in several patches, I decided to cut this section out. This would also give me good access to the chassis in this area. Now back to removing rust. Before I painted, I used the shot blaster just to get in a few tricky areas. and then a clean before painting. Annoyingly, the larger compressor stopped working on me, so I had to make do with this much smaller compressor until it was fixed. Not ideal, but it did do the job. Next up, I did the tubs. Here you can see one of the classic areas these vans rust. The area I decided to work on next was the driver's side, just back from the B-pillar to the back of the van. While I was in this area of the van, we did cut out a section of the non-structural struts. I wanted to do this as this area of the van I want to build a table and bench seats. The table would drop down to make a bed. I want there to be at least one window in the passenger side and possibly one in the driver's side, so when the van is parked you can look out at the view. Again using the shot blaster to get into those trickier areas. I also did the B-pillar whilst doing the inside driver's side. Now onto the passenger side. I then moved on to the remaining areas in the cab. Another area these Talbots commonly go is around the windscreen. The windscreen pillars, scuttle panel, above and below the windscreen seem to always go on these vans. This is due to their notoriously leaky windscreens. We do have a plan to tackle this area, which involves cutting the windscreen section out of a van that's good to weld into this one, which I will cover in another episode. While doing the cab area, I did also take care of the step into the van and also the passenger side door frame. Now on to the inside gutter rails. Then back to the shop blaster to take care of anything I've missed. I didn't film spraying these areas, but here is a clip from my phone of the results. I then moved on to the chassis rails, which I could now access very easily with the cab floor removed. And the final area I will work on in this episode is the engine bay. Another area that these vans rust is these front inner arches. I have two brand new inner arch sections that I bought from Custom Campers UK, which will be welded in to replace mine, as they are too far gone. We removed the steering rack to get into some of the harder to reach areas. I did use some Aqua steel, which is a rust converter, on some pitted areas around the chassis, inner door sills and engine bay, just for a bit of extra protection. This stuff goes on blue and then turns black when it's done its thing. If you're interested in the products I've used or parts I've mentioned in this episode, you can find links to them in the video description. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and ring the bell to see what happens next. Also, if you would like to follow me on Instagram, it's Keeping Up with the Campervan.